On this episode, I'm excited to be co-hosting with my friend, Terrell Maze, former professional football player. Terrell, why don't you start off a little bit and let's talk for just a minute about what it took for you to make it to the pros, and then why don't you introduce our great guest for this week?
Sure. I think, like just mentioned, Terrell Maze played 8 years football professionally, majority in the CFL up in Canada. I think the question of what it took to play in the pros, I think it's a lot about being prepared for opportunities, right? So you have to always put yourself in the best position to succeed because opportunities come and go, and it's not more true than in football because as you see every day, injuries occur, people don't perform, do perform, and you have to, when you have your chance, you're put into the lineup, and I think that goes across any position, any field. When you have your opportunity to shine, you kind of have to take it and run with it. So I think I did a good job of that. I like to say I was an overachiever. I was a smaller defensive back. I think JR will have fun with that. He likes reminding me that. So I think I played up to my ability a little bit beyond. So I think it was really about just taking advantage of opportunities.
You know, growing up in Western Canada myself, winning the Grey Cup may not be as big a deal to a bunch of Americans, but Canadians think that's a big deal. What was that experience like?
That was honestly probably one of the most fun times I had in my professional career. I played in Saskatchewan, so there's not a lot going on in that town besides the CFL team. JR actually knows, he's aware. So our teammates together, we got really close. There's a lot of time to bond. There's not a lot of other activities to do. So when you win or achieve a goal with a group of men that you're super close with, it sticks a little more. So it's funny, we're actually celebrating the 10-year anniversary of that win next month. So I'm going to get to reconnect with some of my old teammates to relive that moment.
Well, the Canadian version of the Super Bowl is a big deal. When I was running a private equity fund in Calgary, I'd been a Calgary Stampeders fan just because people from my little farm town had ended up playing there and stuff like that. And it was the closest city to us. But even though we were in Calgary, like 2/3 of my staff are from Saskatchewan. So like we would end up with like covered in green across the whole office sometimes at our private equity fund with our, like my in-house lawyer. She's like very like sharp dresser, very fashionable, but like she would put on a Rough Riders jersey over her business suit on some of those days. So I feel like a honorary Rough Rider fan. So
yeah, no, that's one thing about the Rough Rider fans. We travel well, and there's so many of them. I was surprised. I was in Jamaica, I think, for a wedding, and we saw a Saskatchewan Rough Rider flag over someone's balcony. Like, what are the odds of that, right? But it's a great fan base.
Listen, I know we got a lot of fun things to talk about today, but why don't you start by introducing JR for us?
So I call JR, I would say he's a former teammate, but he's more than that. He's a friend. He's a brother. San Diego State Aztec Hall of Fame wide receiver, record holder, NFL draft pick, and veteran. Since then, you've been a coach, a mentor, an athletic director, a serial entrepreneur. Can't forget the fact that he's a father and a devoted husband. But one of the things I do want to call out about JR, what I've noticed just from afar, is that all of the things he kind of puts himself to, it's usually towards improving or helping others. And I really admire that about him. But JR, I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. Thank you for coming on today and talking to us.
T-Maze, I've known you for, I think, 20 years. And I don't think I've ever heard you say like that many good things about me. So I think our DB wide receiver rivalry is always living on. But no, I appreciate it, man. You obviously know that, I care a ton about you and your success. And I am a bigger brother, 5 years older than you. You was a true freshman coming in when I was a senior going out. And so really to have that bond with you over the last 15 or 20 years, somebody that I deeply care about, that I'm extremely, extremely proud of everything that you've done since you came into San Diego State as a 147-pound freshman, and all the things that you've done since then. So yeah, man, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here and to be hanging out with you and
No,
Jess.
awesome. Thank you. So I would like to hear your answer to the same question Jess asked me. I mean, you've had a lot of success. Some I kind of breezed across, but so much more. What do you think helped you succeed in that way and make it so far in football and beyond?
I was having this conversation the other day, and I'm going to say something that sounds negative, but I think it's the positive that most athletes have. I think your eyes will probably light up when I say it. Jess, I think you and all the success you've had, your eyes will also probably light up when I say it. I think to be successful, you have to have a little bit of delusion. Um, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter who you are or what your family has done. If you see yourself in a space that you are not in, you have to be a little bit delusional to get yourself from where you are to where you want to be. So I think actually that's probably the biggest thing that has pushed me forward, the delusion of being where I am, my reality, and always wanting to move forward to be in a different space, and knowing despite what people say or what obstacles come up, with a little bit of grit, a lot of bit of will, a lot of bit of faith, that delusion can kind of work to your
Oh, I
advantage.
love that. And I would say I definitely can agree with that. I think as a kid, I was very delusional, especially when it came to sports. You couldn't tell me I wasn't gonna be on the Lakers and the Raiders at the same time, but you kind of formed me a delusion. But no, I agree with that 100%. Um, so since then, I'm curious, what are you up to now? What do you do? What are your delusions focused on these days?
Man, that's a great question. So for me, you kind of mentioned it before, and I didn't really know this about myself, but I've learned it after football. I care about people. I really do. I know a lot of people say that, but for whatever reason, whether it's in my personal life or in my professional life, I kind of feel like God has put me on this earth to be a catalyst. I like to consider myself a vessel to kind of help people, be delusional, right? Get from where they are to where they want to be. And I've done that in a variety of different ways. When I first came out of the NFL, um, I became an athletic director and a head football coach at the age of 29 years old with no experience. I'd never worked in a school before. I had never coached before. But when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to do two things. I wanted to go to the NFL and make $100 million. I may have missed that mark by a little bit. Um, and secondly, I wanted to go back to high school and be a high school football coach and be a business owner. And that was inspired by my coach. My coach when I was in high school was the coach, the high school football, the head coach of the team, but he also owned the Mira Mesa Poway Driving School. And I thought that was so cool that he came and spent his time coaching our team because he wanted to, not because he had to, or not because he needed the money. So that's something that I aspire to be. So that was the first box that I got to check when I got out of the National Football League. Out of pure delusion, I became the head football coach and the athletic director at a small private school in Newport Beach. I convinced Gordon McNeil, who was the head of school at that time, to take a chance on me. And I spent 6 years in that capacity, coaching and mentoring student athletes to get from where they were on the field academically. And now, 15 years later, to see some of the stuff that these guys are doing is just purely incredible. Once I transitioned out of that, I went into full time entrepreneurship. I've always been a I've always been the type of person that likes to look at things that others aren't looking at. I thought all this time in my life I was super competitive. I'm actually not. I'm not very competitive. I'm very collaborative. And so as I got into the business world, I started realizing that if I'm going to sell a product or a service, there's no reason for me to go and, try to sell the same product a different way to somebody else. I started looking for things that people weren't paying attention to and started focusing on that. So my first company was a waste and recycling consulting company. I would go to commercial buildings and say, "Hey, let me check out your trash and see if there's something I can do to help you save some money." There was nobody doing that, so they would be like, "Okay, cool," and I'd be like, "Look, no risk. If I can't save you money, You don't pay me anything, but if I can save you money, just give me a percentage of what I save you, and I'll manage your account for the next 3 to 5 years. And that was a really, really cool way for me to get my foot into the door from a business standpoint, and also start uncovering my passions, which is the ability to look at things that can make a business better that others probably aren't looking at. And so over the last couple of years, what I've done is I've kind of transitioned that thought process back to young JR. There's a lot of things that I wish I would have known as a player, especially from a financial standpoint. And because I have gone through as much as I've gone through over the last 10 years in business, with family, with money, successes and failures, I've created a process that's specifically designed for athletes to help them get the most out of their career. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now, just making sure that the JR of yesterday has a system and a process to maximize that short period of time that we get to play professional football.
I love it. And Jess, I'll let you ask a couple questions. You had a lot there, Jared, and I love it, but I'm gonna pass it to you real quick, Jess.
Growing up in Long Beach, end up NFL with the Panthers and the Dolphins and the famous Cowboys, right? But let's go back to what Terrell was talking about winning this big award at the San Diego State Days. Can you tell us what that was and why you won it?
Yeah, man. So again, it's funny how I can trace all my successes, like moments of success, back to a moment where I was completely delusional. I came to San Diego State as a quarterback. I was a quarterback in high school. San Diego State recruited me as a wide receiver. I'd never played the position before. So as a freshman, I remember going into the locker room and there was a media guide on the coffee table in the FOC, the Football Operations Center. And I opened up the media guide and I started flipping through it. And you start seeing names like Marshall Falk and Darnay Scott, a lot of the guys who had a lot of success, not only at San Diego State, but in the National Football League. And I'd flip into the back, and in the back, they had a list of the record holders at San Diego State. So the person that's had the most catches in a career, the person that's had the most yards in a career. And I remember looking and seeing the receiving list. I looked at the list, I scrolled to the top. Number one was Will Blackwell. He had 197 career catches at San Diego State. This is a guy who has literally never put on a jersey as a wide receiver. I kind of told myself in the moment that I was going to leave the school as the all-time leading receiver at San Diego State. And that's what I worked for. I worked for the ability to get my name into the record books, to leave a legacy. That worked out extremely well for me. Ended up leaving the school as 13 with 13 records, including the one that I wanted, which was the all-time leading receptor at San Diego State, and it ended up resulting in me being inducted into the San Diego State Hall of Fame in 2012.
And so how many how many did you catch?
I really don't keep track. 262, somewhere around there, 262 receptions. Um, yeah, just somewhere around there. I think it was about 262.
So, but I want to talk about this. Getting out there and doing things intentionally. I'm reading the Elon Musk book that Walter Isaacson just came out with, where you got to follow Elon Musk around for a couple of years, right? And he wrote books about Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein. I mean, his books are so famous, right? And he says, you can poke fun of people calling their play if you want, and restating their goal over and over and having their vision board. You can make fun of that all you want, but I'll just tell you, having studied Einstein, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, these people, that's exactly what these guys are doing. They go, this is what I'm trying to pull off, and they tell themselves a million times until they brainwash themselves, and then they do it. And obviously, there's more to it than that. But I want to talk about this idea of kind of the delusionalness, as you said, of having never played the position, and look, and looking at the number going like, yeah, I could do 200. I can do more. I can do more than this. What did that take day in and day out over those years to build the muscle memory, to build the mastery, to, the mental fortitude, the physical skill to reach that level?
I think it took awareness on two fronts. Number one, what am I good at? Number two, what do I need to improve at? I always tend to focus more on the what am I good at, because I think by getting better, even small, at the thing that you're already really good at is way more beneficial than focusing heavily on the thing that you're terrible at. And so for me, I was a bigger guy, 6'1", 200 pounds, but I didn't have very small hands, but big hands. But I had great hand-eye coordination. I wasn't the fastest guy in the world. T Mays will attest to that. But I knew that I had great body control, ball skills. Playing quarterback and running back as a kid really gave me the tools that I needed to be successful at that wide receiver position. So I think that's step number one is, it's kind of counterintuitive to delusion, but there's really no way to get from where you are to where you want to be unless you take inventory. You got to take inventory on the things that you're good at, and you have to continue to try to get better at those things because I think that's what pushes you forward. But you also cannot let the things that you're not so good at hold you back. I wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but I worked hard at my speed, at my conditioning, doing all the things that I could to improve myself in that area.
What's an example? What did it look like working on your speed? Because, for those of us who didn't play, right, I was busy doing competitive judo and snowboarding, right? I just assume everybody goes to practice, everybody works hard. Like, what does it look like to work harder?
That's a really great question. So, when I was in high school, I played basketball and football. Those are the two sports that I played. I was always one of the most athletic in both sports, right? So even though I wasn't the fastest guy on the field, I was always fast enough to get the job done. Well, when I got to college, to get faster, I started training like a track athlete. And that was hell for me. I absolute hated running without a purpose. Just running for miles or, running, T Maze 10 200s around the track. I hated it, but I had to change the way in which I trained in order to maximize my potential. And I wouldn't say I worked harder. I just worked differently to do the thing that I knew was important to get me where I wanted to go.
Terrell, what kind of questions does this bring up for you?
I wanted to kind of chime in on that answer, how I thought about it too, and it'll kind of lead into some of my questions. And I know when you get to that next level from high school to college, it's a shock, right? Because I never met anyone who was both stronger and faster than me. I always had some kind of advantage. And then you get to college and there's multiple people that have that advantage when you're like, wait, I got to figure something out. Like JR said, you have to address it, right? You have to be honest with yourself. Like you said, take inventory. I even think about the little things I would do. I would do small things just to get an edge. It's funny. I laugh at myself thinking about it. But if coach said we had 10 push-ups, I'm going to sneak in 12 and I got 2 more on them today, right? Just little things like that. In my mind, they're going to add up over time and I'm going to get incrementally better. But when I was leaving football, and I'm going to lead into my question for you, JR, I was like, what am I going to do next, right? And I'm like, I want to go to business school. I don't know why. I just feel like this is going to give me the best opportunity to succeed in the future. So I figured out, okay, this is like the delusion. I'm going to go to a top business school. What do I need? I need a great GMAT score. I just took the GMAT on a whim. I had a pretty good score. So then I'm like, okay, my verbal score needs to improve. I started doing flashcards daily. I would just sit there and do flashcards. It was just drilling it. And I think that's that football mentality. And ultimately, I was able to get into a pretty good business school because I had a pretty good score, wrote a decent essay, and I had, I think, a fun story in being a professional athlete. But I say all that, and I'm wondering, JR, what was your transition like? Because for me, it looked pretty smooth because as soon as I finished playing football, I went right into business school and it led to my now career. but there were some times in there that were really hard for me, right? Leaving football, something I've done since I was third grade until I was 31 years old, all of a sudden was just gone. I was able to kind of just throw myself into something that was kind of busy, but I'd never really addressed it. So for me, the busy kept me from kind of feeling the transition. But I'm curious, how would you talk about your transitioning?
The biggest thing I struggled with in transition was going from a finite game to an infinite game. I didn't even realize it. Like when you're in sport, there's a finish line. There's literally always a finish line, and there's multiple finish lines throughout a season. So you always know what you're working towards, and you always know if you won or if you lost. In business, it's not like that, right? In life, it's not like that. There's no finish line. Everything is just kind of this progressive. It's like Groundhog's Day. It's like the thing, it just kind of keeps going and going and going. And ultimately, you got to take inventory and you got to get comfortable with that because that's just the reality of it. The other thing, too, is football is very black and white. Sports is very black and white. I walk into a team room, they give me a playbook, they tell me what my job is. I go out on the field, we come back in the team room, and they tell me if I did my job or if I didn't do it. The eye in the sky doesn't lie. Did I get to 17 yards depth? Or did I get to 19 or did I get to 14? Did I cut it short? Did I get off press or did I get jammed up? It is very black and white. And there's comfort in that. There's comfort in knowing that the thing that you're doing, you're going to get instant feedback to know if you did it right or if you did it wrong. And if you got tough skin, you can work through the wrongs and get more wins than you do losses. In transition, I absolutely struggled with that. I struggled with people not being able to tell me what do I need to do to be better, whether it was business or whether I was the athletic director at the school. It was a world of gray, and I struggled with that. So my transition, if I'm being fully transparent, I am still, after 20 years of being out of the game, trying to wrap my head around what does J.R. Tolver in the infinite game look like? And what is this world of gray that I now have to be okay with? What does that look like for me as well? And these are answers that I'm constantly searching for on a daily basis if I'm being particularly or if I'm being 100% honest with you.
Man, no, I mean, all of that hit home. Obviously, it resonates. And I struggle with that too. I love the direct feedback, whether it's the crowd, a teammate, a coach, uh, your job security. You know if you're doing well or not immediately. So, I remember kind of entering the corporate world and not having that, and people, we're used to kind of very direct feedback. You might get cursed out and said sometimes, but people kind of tiptoe around those tough conversations. And you're like, just tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm right. And I can work through that. But so I definitely feel you on that. I talked about a little bit me when I was thinking about transition. I had kind of the benefit of, I paid attention to some of my older teammates. I was like, okay, I see kind of what happens next, and I want to avoid this or try to plan a little more. So like I said, I was studying for the GMAT, trying to prepare to go to business school to make it as smooth as possible. Wasn't as smooth. Did you do anything to kind of prepare or think about it, or how did you look at that?
Yeah, I did, man. And I started this conversation by saying I care deeply about people. I'm a relationship person. I really value relationships. I have the same group of friends that I've had since I was, 15, 16 years old. So I care deeply about people. And I've always considered that getting from where you are to where you want to be, people is usually the answer. It's not necessarily, it sounds cliche. It's not what you know, it's who you know. But I've truly believed that if you're trying to jump from not A to B, you can work your way through that. But if you're trying to get from C to Y, normally there's a person or a relationship that can unlock and help you with that thing. So one of the things that I did naturally, and looking back on it, it makes total sense. but at the time I really didn't think much about it, was I went to every single head football coach that cut me and I asked them for a letter of recommendation. I knew it was a numbers game. I knew that the times that I got released, it wasn't because I didn't play poorly or I played poorly. It was because I just got caught in a wrong situation. I knew this because the coaches that I played under always gave me great feedback. I was always a captain through, youth and high school and college. So I had that kind of captain's mentality, although I never got elevated to that position in the pros. And so I used to get great feedback from my coaches, my head coaches, my position coaches, special teams coaches. So anytime they kicked me out the building, anytime I walked up to the door, my key fob didn't work, I was on the phone the next day asking Bill Parcells or Todd Haley, Dave Wannstedt, Sean Payton, hey, can you guys write me a letter of recommendation? I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I just felt like having those relationships to vouch for me in my transition were going to be valuable. And when I went and got the job at Sage Hill School with no experience, those are the 4 or 5 letters that I put on the table to say, hey, listen, I know you don't know me from the man on the moon, but I know you know who Bill Parcells is. And here's what Bill Parcells had to say about me. Give me an opportunity to come into your organization. I promise that I'll add value. So that was one of the things that I did in transition, kind of naturally, that I think really aided me getting from where I was as a former player to where I was able to go as a professional or as a business person.
That's super smart. Networking early. But Jess, I'm gonna hand it over to you if you might have a couple.
I think I'm going to ask you something as a transition into what I want to ask, JR. So, Terrell, first, I think we got to give a shout out to the friends that got us introduced, Nathan Elliott, Noah Bobek at Frontrunner and Guy Horner. And that was so cool to go to that McLaren event. I'm like really excited about their F1 thing coming up here, Vista Las Vegas. So happy those guys. By the way, you've known Nathan for a long time. Like, how did you, what is it about Nathan that you kept hanging out with him?
Nathan, he's very similar to JR, and I'm surprised I haven't introduced you guys to each. The fact that he's a people connector, right? He's just a natural social butterfly, I would say. And it was funny the way we met. He was out with another one of my teammates, and I just, we just struck up a conversation. He was like, let's stay connected. And I kind of would just tell him some of my ideas, thinking about in business. He was always supportive of the ideas as far as that kind of like teammate mentality. And then to JR's point, like, hey, I know this person that does this. Let me set up that conversation. And so I would, it inspired me to do the same for him. So I was able to kind of pay it back. And that just built on our relationship. So yeah, Nate's a great guy. And I'm super glad he connected us. And JR, I'm going to have to connect you with him as well.
I got to tell you, so I've never been to an F1 event. So I was so excited that night when we were hanging out, and Guy and Nathan and I were like, we got to have you come to the F1 event to Vista Las Vegas for the Las Vegas F1 and do the podcast from the event. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Anybody who wants to be there, go check out Vista Las Vegas. It's going to be rad. But you've been talking about the entrepreneurial things and the stuff and this idea of like your genuine passion for helping all these pros, no matter what league they're coming out of, to like bring that same ethic but apply it to the civilian world. And I guess my question for you is, if you could go back to yourself and give yourself a little bit of advice of your own transition, what would you go back and tell yourself coming out of the pros?
I think I'm pretty happy with the chances and choices I made, but I think I would start them sooner, start exploring other things. The tricky thing about being an athlete is you have plan A and there's no plan B, right? Because you feel like if you have a plan B, it's taken away from plan A. Keep the main thing the main thing. But I think what I learned was in my last year, as I started tiptoeing into other things, like maybe I'll go to business school, could lead to this. It actually, I felt, made me play better because I felt a little freer, if you will. Not putting all my eggs in one basket. I was a little looser on the field and I had more fun. I was able to enjoy it. So I think kind of tapping into that, but not overdoing it a little sooner, I think that could have helped me in a number of ways, right? Both on the field and exploring more options off.
You know, I love that example. This is not on the same scale, but as you were talking, I was thinking about skateboarding. Like, I still skate. You know, I'm 43 years old and I still skate half pipes, right? And I love, people make fun of skaters who wear helmets. I love wearing a helmet. I put on elbow pads, wrist guards. I have like the biggest, like the big, like mega ramp knee pads, right? And it's because I feel like, okay, I'm going to go for it like I'm still 17 because this is going to be survivable. If I can't pull off what I'm going to try, I'm probably not headed to the hospital. I'm just going to have some scrapes and bruises, and like, it's funny how like snowboarding and powder, like we do a lot of backcountry, and it's like when there's a powder landing, you're way more likely to try that, try and jump that cliff or try and do that trick that's a little outside the comfort zone that you haven't actually landed before, because you're not going to die, like, so, okay. JR, same question. If you could redo your transition over, you make it to the NFL, you've achieved so many boyhood dreams, now entering the next chapter of life, what advice would you give a younger version of yourself preparing for that transition?
Yeah, I think T Mays spot on with that. I think people who do something special, they tend to go an inch wide and a mile deep. We're very, very focused. If you think about football, it's easy to say 80 to 90% of your active work time is focused on that subject. But I think T Mays just hit something that most people, especially pro athletes, need to understand. Like, going a inch deep and a mile wide will not distract you from going an inch wide and a mile deep in your sport. Start learning about stuff. I mean, if you have a financial advisor, like, go an inch deep with them. Like, try to figure out, why he's telling you what he's telling you. If you're thinking about getting into business or you want to be in real estate, go an inch deep. Like, don't be afraid to sit down and ask questions and get exposure to these things that you may transition into when your career is all said and done. Now, you can't do both. You can't go an inch mile and a wide. You can't go an inch wide and a mile deep in football and in real estate. You just can't do it. Like, there's just not enough time to be an expert at both of those things. But if you're gonna be a mile deep in football, you can be an inch deep in real estate, and start really kind of learning about the basics and tying things together. I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have spent a little bit more time honoring my curiosity. I'd always been curious about entrepreneurship and business, and really just taking that little bit of time to let my insecurities go, to be afraid of feeling dumb or not being the expert in the room, and just having very casual conversations about things that could push me forward in the future.
It's funny you bring up real estate. We had Manti Teo on the show recently, and he's talking about, like, in this next phase of life, his entrepreneurship, and specifically a lot of real estate, and how he's found that attractive, and he is like putting in his dues to really excel as he's embraced that as a big chapter of his next life. His documentary on Netflix came out about the whole catfishing thing and all this, and he was like really honest about overcoming struggles and trials, whether it was injuries or whether it was press that he never meant to have and these kind of things. JR, when you think about unexpected hardships when you're in the NFL, what do you feel like are some of the principles that helped you adapt and overcome?
I think faith, and just first and foremost, like, I was raised in the church. I was raised to know that there's something much bigger out there than myself or what I'm going through. I love football. I mean, football was absolutely my first love. I fell in love with football when I was 9 years old, and I didn't divorce the game. The game divorced me. And so I was heartbroken when this thing that I loved and cared for so passionately was taken away from me. So I would definitely say that my faith allowed me to kind of persevere through that heartbreak, find myself for who I really was. As much as I like to think I'm a football player, I was never a football player. JR was just a person who played the game. So I really had to find out who I was. I went through an executive leadership class after I left the game, and I did some deep and intrinsic introspective learning, and I learned that I value efficiency, effectiveness, collaboration, and I had to take all those things that were inside of me and bring them to the surface. Now when people look at me, I want people to say, man, JR is a connector. Like, go talk to JR. If you go talk to JR and you tell him about what you're doing, I promise you he'll find somebody to put you in front of that can help you. It used to be JR is a football player. Like, go talk to JR and he'll tell you stories about all the, things that he's done. But now I realized that was just it was really a facade. My real identity for who I am and who I want to be now is really tied to my internal and my intrinsic values. And that's what I continue to try to work on a daily basis. Now, don't get me wrong. When I see T Mays, I do want to line up against him and maybe catch a fade on him. I do want to do that. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, the JR today and the JR of the past are essentially the same person, just two different vehicles.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't feel like we can do this kind of an interview without at least one NFL story. Tell us one of your favorite NFL stories.
Oh man, my favorite NFL story. My rookie year, um, I was drafted by the Dolphins. I get into the locker room. I get so I was coming west to east. I was in San Diego. I flew into Miami, but I got there late at like 6 or 7 o'clock. So I had missed basically all of the first day's meetings, right? And so I sit down in the first meeting that I had ever sat in. Guys had already gone through 2 or 3 meetings, and the special teams coach, Keith Armstrong, he starts talking, and he turns around and he asked me a question. And I had no idea what the answer was, so I just gave him the answer that came to my head. And he absolutely ripped me a new one. Who do you think you are? I don't care what you did in college. Don't think you're going to come here and make this team and not cover. I mean, he just absolutely ripped me a new one. So I was pissed, right? Because I didn't know why he was yelling at me, but I realized later, man, this dude is yelling at me because he thought I was in the meeting before and I wasn't. I was still on the airplane, right? So then the next day I go out and I have this shitty attitude. And it's my first time on an NFL football field. And Keith Armstrong just put me in the worst attitude ever. And as a kid, being in San Diego, I used to watch the Chargers. And Junior Seau was the star of the San Diego Chargers at the time. Well, Junior Seau signed an offseason deal with the Miami Dolphins. And I knew Junior Seau. I loved Junior Seau, admired and respected Junior Seau. So being in the same locker room as him was surreal, right? So we go through the first practice. I have a great first practice catching the football. I have a great second practice catching the football. The next day, we're going into our third practice, and I'm just standing outside stretching. I'm sore. I'm kind of ready to go home at this point because it was a mini camp. And I hear this voice, JR. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, dude, I'm in the middle of Miami. Nobody knows me out here. And I hear it again, JR. And I turn around and I see 5'5" in the opposite corner. And he's like, and I drop my helmet and I like full speed sprinted over to Junior to see why he was calling me. So I get there, I'm out of breath, and Junior looks me dead in my eyes and he says, "You're doing a great job. Keep it up. You're gonna make this football team." And as a person who was a fifth round pick who had to fight for his life every single day as a rookie to make that football team, that is my absolute one moment in the National Football League that I'll never forget. And I would see Junior after, roundabout in town, and I would always remind him of that. He probably impacted so many players the way he impacted me. And when he passed away, I was completely heartbroken. But that was absolutely my number one moment in the National Football League, without question.
I think, I'll tie these two together. You asked JR a question earlier, like how he got through some hardships and hard moments on the field. And I think for me, one of the things was just gratitude. I think early in my career, it's easy to, get frustrated about things. You're not getting, maybe it's playing time, maybe it's the guy you train with is in a better situation, but you think you're better than him. Like, why is he, whatever it is, you kind of look across the aisle. Comparison is a thief of joy. So I think getting to a point where you're like, you know what, there are so many more people that wish they were in just the position I am. So I have to sit and like appreciate it and, cherish it. So I think I got to that point. It took me a little while because I was cut at a young age, super frustrated seeing people kept on the team that I felt, wait, I should be there. So I think once I got to that point where I kind of let that go, and like I said, I think I found a home in the CFL. And then I was there for multiple years. If you look at my history, I kind of bounced around a little bit. Then finding that home, finding the team, going to camp, and they already know my name. You know, re-signing, seeing. I think leading up to all of that to say, leading up to the Grey Cup with that team, I think I was at a point where I appreciated what I had. I was secure. I was comfortable. I was having fun. And then winning it with like some true friends, I think that moment was probably one of the best that I could think of.
Terrell, just before we let JR go, I want to ask you a question. When you think about these people who are willing to try something that most people don't believe in, them becoming a pro athlete, them becoming a multi-billionaire business owner, them making it to the classified units of special ops, like somebody who's like, as JR would say, somewhat delusional, but they're willing to take personal responsibility and take an inventory and get radically honest about what they need to improve at. Like for somebody like that, what's your main piece of advice for them?
I think the quote I was trying to think of is, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough, right? So hang on to that. If it scares other people, even better. Take advantage of time while you have it, your youth. It doesn't even have to be youth, your opportunity. So one thing that always kind of pushed me when I would chase, I would say dreams, or I would set goals, I would tell myself, you don't want to look back at this moment and be mad at yourself for not going for it. Like you're going to beat yourself up. So look back on this moment and be glad that you chased it. And if you don't make it, then you've learned lessons, and there's no harm in that, right? But always be proud of your decisions and try to like challenge yourself to be better. So I think that always got me on like, there were so many days where I'm like, I want to quit. I want to, in whatever aspect. And I would always say that you're going to look back and be glad you just pushed through it. So.
Well, just before we let JR go, maybe one final thing. What's something else you admire about JR? Why do you stay friends with him all these years?
One of the thing about him is he's going to challenge you too. So he's going to challenge the way you're thinking about stuff. And to the point where if I'm dreaming big, he's going to say, why not bigger? You know what I mean? So it's like, wait, you're right. I could push it a little further. He's like, so I think having those type of people in your corner, I gravitate towards that, right? Challengers, people that are pushing themselves. And then you heard him. He's just a genuine person that wants to see you succeed. So I think that type of energy in your life is always warranted. And he's been nothing but that to me. So I'm grateful.
Appreciate it anytime. I love having these conversations. So anytime you guys want to get back together and do it again, just let me know.